congressman from the 2nd District of Virginia. That's Virginia Beach, the Eastern Shore, some of Norfolk, some of Newport News. Congressman Scott Rigell. Congressman, great to have you, and Merry Christmas.
Hey, Merry Christmas, John, to you and your family, and really good to be back on the show. You know, it's truly is one of the few venues where substantive issues can be worked through, so I appreciate it.
Okay, and don't forget, if you're around on Wednesday, don't forget to tune in. Your colleague, Randy Forbes, will be guest hosting our show 6 to 10. Don't forget to, maybe you should call in, right?
Well, I'll do so if you'd like for me to, and I'm sure Randy will do a great job.
Oh, he is excellent at it. We look forward to having you back as guest hosting also. Congressman,
yeah, that was fun.
Congressman, let's get to the Crown Omnibus bill, you voting in favor of it. A lot of outrage out there. A lot of Republicans feel betrayed. Give our audience an opportunity to walk through your rationale.
Well, I'd say, and thanks again for the opportunity, John, I'd say first that the anger is understandable. And it's not only understandable but warranted. If you see the direction our country's going, you know, if you're not troubled by it, something's wrong. And I really won't yield to anyone that there's a better strategy than the one we took, and I'll explain why. You know, governing and serving in Congress is about making decisions, oftentimes hard ones. And if you look at the two alternatives that were before us, I'd say the first one is the Ted Cruz type of alternative. You know, just let's go at it, a rumble, okay. What would happen, John? I'd have to ask you this question. Is that any more than a messaging alternative, that is, to vote no and not have any funding? Is it any more than a messaging tactic, unless one says that shutting down the government for some extended period of time is going to change the president's mind on this matter? Isn't that have to be an alternative, right? Shutting the government down? Let's just be clear on what we're talking about here.
Well, what if Congress, in lieu of this big sweeping omnibus bill, which takes all these riders in that are driving people bananas, well, what if you simply passed a 90-day continuing resolution, reconvened in January, had your majority?
Wait, John, okay, let's go down that path. You're saying pass a 90-day resolution, continuing resolution?
Yes.
Well, you haven't defunded the president's actions, anything. And all that does is it brings forward spending in the exact manner in which it was funding the government the previous year, which hurts our military in a material, serious way. And most people don't understand that. I live this out every day, spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day in our district, listening. Here's where we're at. If we had gone down that path and this thing had failed, well, we'd be going right into Christmas. First, the president and Harry Reid. They've got the airtime, they've got the podium, they've got the microphone. Now, let's look at the alternative. We have actually passed 11 appropriations bills in this measure, 7 of which were passed by the House earlier, all but one of which was passed out of committee, controlled by Republicans, conservative Republicans. Mm-hmm. A lot of good things in these bills. And so where we're at now is that we will be approaching February 28th, and instead of having this prospect of the entire government shut down, where will we be, John? We're going to have 11 out of the 12 areas of government fully funded, including our military. So a shutdown is only limited to which department? Homeland Security. While it's very serious, it's a lot more palatable. And, you know, most American people are going to say, well, you know, it doesn't really affect me directly, so I don't really care. Tell you what, you get into a full government shutdown, and people care. From Wallops Island, the contractors who don't get paid, our watermen who work on the Chesapeake Bay, they can't get to their harvest. The impact of a shutdown, John, I don't think most people fully grasp it. Am I willing? Yeah, for the right measure, if I thought it's going to advance our cause. But there are two alternatives before us. The bill and the process by which it got to us, I didn't like, but I'd say it's largely driven by the obstructionist Harry Reid, who didn't bring one appropriations bill to the Senate floor. Not one. Not one. It's unconscionable. And imperfect as we are as a Republican conference in the House, we did a good job. And better than we have in previous years. So progress has been made. There's a lot of good things in these bills. And by the way, for everybody who starts out with this thing of $1 trillion, look, we're spending less in discretionary spending, significantly less, and only because of a Republican conference. The only reason that that's the case is because we took the House. And I take some pride in that, not in me personally, but just that our party did that. But for us taking back the House, that wouldn't have happened. And we have largely, and as a fiscal conservative, I'll tell you, we have largely gotten hold of discretionary spending. We're spending less, $160 billion or so less than we were when I got in office. The problem, of course, is mandatory spending. That's not the topic of the day, but that's what threatens our country. And we ought to ask people on the left and the right, what's your specific plan to do that? And you know what, John, you've been so good to give me some running room here. Mm-hmm. Either I've lost the connection or you've let me run a bit. I don't know which.
No, I'm giving you the opportunity. This is a very bothersome and emotional issue for a lot of people like me on the other end of the line, which I just, you look at some of these riders in it, and it's hard for us to fathom, why they couldn't have been debated singly and piecemealed out.
Yeah,
common sense.
So let me tell you, okay, well, listen, I share that. I fought that. I've stood in my conference consistently. If you ask most members, rank and file members in the Republican conference, hey, what's Rigell known for? What's his, everybody's got their, something they're thought of.
You're known as being a fiscal hawk.
Yeah, and to the right and for regular order, doing things the way we should. Voting against the rule that allowed us to go into reset, for example, whenever we can find it. Sometimes they tuck it away and stuff so hard you can't even find it. But this idea of doing our work, not recessing in the summer, I really can't process that. Spoken to the Speaker directly about this in his office. And I'll tell you this, and it's okay to give you this inside scoop. I met with him a few weeks ago with a few others. And I said, listen, we're really concerned about some of the things we're doing. We haven't gotten as far as we want. And I said, Mr. Speaker, listen, what you ought to do is go into conference and look at all the members and say, let me tell you something. Unless we have all 12 appropriations bills passed before next summer, we're not going home. That's the end of the discussion. And that's it. And just sit down. I said, Mr. Speaker, I'd be the first to be at the podium to applaud you for that. And I said, the conference would be behind you. It's a good idea. That's a good idea. Whether he puts it into practice or not, we'll have to see. But, John, I would ask everybody listening to simply do this, to take the anger, which is entirely understandable and, frankly, what caused me to run for this office, and to say, how do we direct it? Mm-hmm. Is it just to react, or is it to stop, to think, and then to act decisively? Because if you go down this path of voting no, the other day, we'd be in a shutdown situation right now. Because absent a willingness to do that, that vote would have been nothing more than a messaging vote. Worthless.
I don't know, Congressman. I really think that's a false equivalency because you could have passed a continuing resolution. Now,
listen, let's go down that path, my friend. What does that look like? You would have funded precisely that which this whole effort isn't directed at defunding. You, by your own words, you're saying, pass it. Look, that's all we did on this one element of it, which is Homeland Security. This way, when we get to February 28th, we have a fully unified Congress. And we have the voice, John. We have the podium. We have, instead of Harry Reid with that pathetic obstructionist voice going up to the podium, reeking of cynicism, instead of that voice getting the airtime, who do we have? At least it's Mitch McConnell, whether you like him or not. It's far better than Harry Reid.
Well, that's
and
true.
So we'll have a unified voice. And, John, help me to understand your view. I really don't.
Well,
why is passing a 90-day resolution any different and better, superior to allowing us to get all the good. There are many good things in these bills, many good things, because they're fought for by hard conservatives.
Because
so how does your plan?
Because you got a lot of because you got these Wall Street bailout writers in there that make no sense for the little guy that's trying to punch a clock today.
Well, let me make sure
Wall
I
Street
understand
bailout.
That. Okay, your objection then is not so much to the immigration.
No, it is to that.
But these other matters.
It is to that, and I was disappointed Saturday that Ted Cruz only got 22 Republicans to back his motion. I was kind of shocked at that. But this thing looked like, Congressman Rigell, this thing looked like a Christmas fruit basket for bankers, lobbyists, big money donors, big corporatists, and the tarpist. I want to know, what did the little guy, the working guy, get out of this thing? He didn't get anything.
I can tell you that, listen, first, to not acknowledge your point is just ignoring reality. There's validity in your point.
Thank you.
But there is. But, and I don't like much of what's in there. I can tell you that the question is, in trying to weigh the totality of the evidence and the case for and against, the judgment that I came to and many others came to was that our goals of less government, more individual freedom, and indeed the separation of powers, advancing that, which is critical, and I fought for, especially on the use of force, that they were best advanced by voting for the resolution. And, of course, I did. The only time that I've had a bill before me that was uncontroversial is when we name a federal facility, typically a post office, for a fallen service member. Once you get beyond that, John, you're looking at imperfect legislation. And, listen, it is so easy. You could find a reason to vote no on virtually everything. And I can tell you, our ability as a nation, first, to reject apathy. And for any of those, and my wife, Carrie, came in and said, Scott, some people are saying, she was listening to your show, I was working on something else. She said, some people are just saying they're not going to vote anymore. And I said, man, well, that's the worst outcome. I mean, I encourage people not to do that, but to engage. But listen, we have to have the discernment, the wisdom to recognize the difference between a compromise and principle, which is what largely got us in this fix that we're in as a nation. It's got to be rejected. And the difference between a compromise and principle and a principle compromise. I tell you, this is the hard truth, John, that absent our willingness to vote for a principle compromise, to recognize it, fight for it, and advance it, if we're not willing to do that, then frankly, we're done. We're done as a country. Because what we're going to end up with will never end up getting a solution set to our mandatory spending. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. And absent that, we are bankrupt with horrific outcomes that come along with it. So when is the last time that Heritage Action put out an actual, what do they call it, a measured vote or something like a scored vote? When have they ever put out a scored vote that said, vote for this principle compromise? Never. Not in my recent memory. Listen, I'm a person who was supporting Heritage financially when I was in, college. I think the world of them for the longest time. I think they've gone a bit sideways on us.
But, Congressman, the question becomes for common sense conservatives like me, when do you fight on a hill? We just keep saying next time, January, February, down the road, get McConnell, this, that. When do you stand and fight? When do we fight for something?
Well, listen, I reject the premise if you're saying, Scott, when are you going to fight? I don't know.
I didn't say that. I said as conservatives, when are we going to fight?
I'll tell you this. I'm saying that we've got to have the assets, and I would say, so I'm so thankful that, hallelujah, that we're going to have a majority in the Senate. We've been fighting. And listen, with one arm tied behind our back in the House, we've reduced I mean, I don't think most people realize that. If you did a poll of even your listeners and said, has mandatory spending come down in the 4 years that Scott Rigell served in office? Most people, oh, no, that's probably spending's going up. No, that's not the truth. That's why I put a chart in our last Rigell report. And I encourage your listeners to go to rigell.house.gov, rigell.house.gov. And I'm not saying that people, they'll listen to the argument this morning and they'll all agree with me, but at least people ought to have an understanding of what the two sides are. But, John, I'm telling you that we've been fighting in the House, imperfect as we are. We've been fighting, and we've done many, many good things, and there are many good things. Okay, what's going to help the common man? How about all the energy provisions that stopped the Obama administration from imposing new fees? Listen, I'm not there's a bird out west, I forget, the sage grouse. Listen, the Obama administration is blocked from using that to shut off economic activity and thousands and thousands of acres. There are many, many practical things that are helping us, including specifically locally getting continuity to our shipbuilding and our submarine building. John, this whole thing about national defense, do you ever hear Ted Cruz or Heritage Action here recently talk about our National Defense Authorization Act and the need for continuity of defense funding? No, I haven't heard that. And every time we go into a continuing resolution, John, you end up with this: a sharply decreased efficiency buying power of $1. Instead of $1 going to defense, buying $1's worth of defense, because of the uncertainty, because of continuing resolution, we're down to 80%, 80 cents on the dollar, maybe 70 cents on the dollar. John, I'm immersed in this, serving on House Armed Services. I know what it does. I know the disruption that going into a government shutdown. When I heard from Waterman from Tangier and all around the district, I'm not saying I'm unwilling, but you got to know where it leads to. John, look at where we'll be February. And listen, do I understand why I say, when Scott talks about out in the future, this is the same thing I've told the Speaker Boehner. I get it, John. I get the frustration. But if we'll slow down and look at the facts, on February 28th, and that ain't all that long out there. I didn't say 2018, John. I said February the 28th. Look at where we'll be. The government is fully funded, except for this one issue. And if we had gone down that path that you had suggested, and frankly, I like debating you on these kind of things. Oftentimes we always agree on many things, but like any friends, we're going to disagree sometimes. But on this matter, frankly, the path that you wanted to take us down, wow. You would have funded, my friend. You would have funded the president's executive order.
Yeah, well, I'd have done that, but I wouldn't have given Wall Street another bailout. I can tell you that. Hey, Congressman, we are out of time. I really appreciate your passion.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
I appreciate your being with us, and so does our audience, and I appreciate your spirited defense and your reasoning.
Well, these are intense matters, and it was given great thought, John. I mean, it really was. But thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well,
Ask your listeners to go to rigell.house.gov.